All right. Well, welcome to the Rogue Lawyer, and very, very happy to have Ernest Zelkovic, former client of mine here, one of my first and favorite clients, and one of the cases that helped define me as a lawyer many years ago, when I was fortunate enough to meet your family and be able to provide some assistance to you soon after I had left being a prosecuting attorney. And how many years has it been since we met?
It's been a little
It's
while.
over 10, right? It's
Yeah,
like 10 to 12 years.
approaching 10 years, yeah.
Right. And so Ernest came to me, his family came to me actually needing help. And Ernest is now somebody who's very active in the community, helping people's lives. It is just a pure success story by any measure in terms of having, you probably tell your story best, but the way that I could just set the stage is your family came from Bosnia, escaping the war in Bosnia, came over to Canada, and your family, hardworking, good people. You got yourself into school working hard and then encountered some stress that resulted in a mental health episode, kind of breakdown. And then the next thing you know, you've got, 7 to 10 cops beating the crap out of you back before there were too many YouTube channels. Right? Is that a good summary?
Yeah, that's a good summary for sure.
And then as a result of the arrest, the city kind of vilified you because the chief of police wanted to protect his officers, and he knew that they looked bad on the video. And so the way that he compensated that was to double down on your culpability as opposed to look at whether his officers used too much force. So why don't you give our listeners a little background in terms of what happened on campus that day and how it affected your life?
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually in my fourth year of university, and as you know, university is a pretty stressful time. So I wasn't sleeping very well. I was quite stressed out with exams, and making sure that my marks are high, and thinking about next plans, what happens after that. And so with all of that stress, I experienced actually a psychotic episode. And it was an acute psychotic episode, and what it really is just being out of touch with reality. And mine was very much stress induced because there wasn't really a family history at all, and it can really happen to anybody. But I do remember just being on campus, and everybody just appeared like little midgets around me, and I didn't really know what was happening in class.
Like you're sitting in class normal.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden kind of this transition happens.
Yeah. I just couldn't comprehend what the professor was saying. I know I wanted to reach out to a professor about an assignment, about some questions, and then I just started walking, trying to find his office. And normally, like I would know where his office is, but at that time, being so disoriented and out of touch with reality, I couldn't find it. And I remember just going into this room, stating to a professor, that's my room, right? Because I was just out of touch with it. And so he left the office. I went inside, and I remember just sitting down and just sweating, and my mind is racing, and I'm just completely out of it. And then I just heard, I think it was police officers at the time, because they were yelling. And so they tried to get in the door, but I was really scared because it was very traumatizing. I didn't really know, I couldn't comprehend why I was in trouble in that state of mind. And so I held the door, and eventually when I thought it was maybe safe to go out, when I exited that door, two of the police officers actually started attacking me. I do remember pepper spray, mace spray in my eyes at that time. I do remember the baton strikes to the shin, which I still have a mark of.
And we'll put some context, and people should know this. There's a lot of university campuses where they call their constables campus police. Now, in Canadian law, they're not allowed to call themselves police. The universities do it as an act of intimidation, but they're special constables. They don't have full police powers, but they're special constables. However, in some cases, they're kind of a little bit of clown cops who want to be tough with the students, but they're not as well trained. The ones who aren't ex-police, and there was a couple who were retired police officers, But these kind of guys were, I would say, not the best trained in the world. And for context to the listeners, because I was your lawyer on this, and we sued the campus and the police and all that, and nobody thought we could win.
Yeah.
You're in this office disoriented. You hadn't done anything violent whatsoever. You just told a prof, this is my office, and he left.
Yeah.
And these two cops are outside the office door, and when you finally come out, they pepper spray you, and they hit you with a bit of pepper spray. But these guys actually pepper spray across you and hit each other in the face.
Yeah.
And then are swinging their batons and blind, and then you just walk away. And they call in because they're pepper sprayed, officers down.
Yeah.
Right? Which then triggers a whole series of events. And all you've done is open the door, get pepper sprayed, hit with the baton, and then just walk.
Yeah.
And these guys are incapable of following you. But that launches a whole series of events. What happens after that?
Like I remember just trying to escape. Like I thought this was a dream because I didn't really understand why they started beating me. So I just wanted to go outside to see if, is this a dream or is this reality? And then so I was just walking down the stairs, and as I was in the social sciences building, right in that main hallway, as soon as you get into those front doors, officers attacked me again. They just started beating me. And then eventually I went on the ground, and the strikes just kept coming and coming, and I couldn't comprehend why. I didn't understand why this was happening. And so eventually, they got me back up on my feet, and then when we entered outside, I fell to my knees, right? Because I don't know if it's because I realized this wasn't a dream or whether I experienced a bit of, unconsciousness. I don't know. And then I just remember, I went to the hospital. I do know that. And whether the hospital came first or jail after, I don't know. And that's where my recovery period started.
You're actually there for 3 weeks after recovering from your injuries. And what, listeners, the power of the video, it's much more front of mind with people today, but back then it wasn't as common to capture all these videos. But the thing, I often think, if those students hadn't pulled out their phones and videoed the beating you were taking, like, what would your recovery or anything have been? Because the police from the get-go said you were violent and said that you were resisting. And the video, I'm sure we'll show it. It's, I think it was labeled "Stop Resisting," UWO for University of Western Ontario. And you can hear you saying, "Guys, what's going on?"
Yeah.
And you've got like 6 cops pulling you in different directions, hitting you in places you're not supposed to be hit with a baton, pepper spraying you, 54 elbows, 27 knees, multiple baton strikes to the back, close to your spine, down the leg. And it's, I always said, like, how do you stop resisting when you're being pulled in 5 directions?
Yeah.
Right. And you're just, and then the treatment of you, because as soon as that video got posted and then went over 1 million views really quickly.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden the police and the campus turned into protecting themselves rather than trying to figure out what happened.
Yeah.
And that damage control resulted in them trying to vilify you as being violent, even though there was no evidence of you being violent, other than the after the fact statements, when they got together to try and cover themselves up, knowing they were videoed, putting it together. How important was family to you to help you get through this?
I would say family was probably the most important recovery factor. And the main reason being, like family to me was the only constant in my life. We came here from Bosnia, war-torn country. Much of what you see right now is happening in Palestine. We came here for the same reasons, because of a genocide, right? And so, following the recovery, I just remember I didn't want to leave my house. The newspapers were never stopping, always putting me in a bad light, shaming my family, shaming everybody. And I remember just in, in the basement, my mom's like, if they didn't kill us in the genocide, they're not going to kill you now,
Mm-hmm.
And that was really when I accepted that I needed much more help than I was initially
Mm-hmm.
indicating to the doctors.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I kept saying, I'm doing all these things and so on, but really I wasn't. I mean, I would say for the first 6 months following the incident, I was very much isolated. I didn't really want to go anywhere. I had no energy. I did not sleep. I had nightmares. And it was just being there for my family, knowing that they are there. That's what kept me going.
Yeah, your mom was one of the sweetest ladies, and she was in a difficult position because she actually worked at the university.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And had to stay there when she saw how you were being treated. And, somebody who served in Bosnia,
Yeah.
In Sarajevo during it, like I saw firsthand what happened there. And because people know me on the Rogue Lawyer for being somebody who's good with language,
Yeah.
I know what a genocide is. It wasn't a genocide in Bosnia. It was ethnic cleansing and three factions fighting for territory.
Right.
I know what a genocide is, and
Right.
what's happening in Gaza is not a genocide. It's political powers trying to get an advantage, and atrocities happen all over the world.
Yeah.
Genocide is where you kill everybody you see of that race. That's what happened in Germany to the Jews. That was a genocidal. Right. What happened in Bosnia to Bosnian was ethnic cleansing. They wanted the land. They said, get out. If you didn't get out, they killed you.
That's fair.
And I saw that horrific. And for your family to get out and avoid that is spectacular. And it certainly made you guys stronger.
Yeah.
But you were pushed to the limits. I remember how much your family was, but they were so like quietly supportive of you.
Yeah.
So that you had time to recover from, a psychotic episode sounds unusual to most people, but really what it is something in the brain malfunctions because of stress or a chemical or, any type of factor. And then all of a sudden the brain doesn't work the way it's supposed to.
Yep.
Right. And having helped a lot of people in that situation, what people need in that situation is help, not a beating.
Yeah.
And the problem is, and what we have to really fight in law, because everybody told us, you won't have a case. There's no way you can take on the University of Western Ontario. It's one of Canada's biggest universities. You can't take on the police. And, but, up until that point, people kind of accepted that Rodney King, I don't know if you're familiar with Rodney King, you're probably too young, but there was a beating that happened in LA where they beat up this black man on the street, and they said it was because of excited delirium. And the cops always use this. It's now been debunked, excited delirium, but it's essentially beat the person until they stop resisting. And nobody had ever explored, well, what if they can't understand the directions?
Right.
They're not resisting. Their brain is not in a spot where they can understand. So you don't have a license to just beat them, especially if they pose no threat to anybody. And you didn't actually pose any threat. You were just wandering around not knowing where you are. Yeah. But the chain of events led them to kind of think, okay, we can escalate. By the time we got this baby to trial, stressful, going up against the big guns. But the media was paying attention, and I just, I'll never forget that trial because those officers took the stand and just lied through their teeth, right, to save themselves. I actually had one of those officers, I probably haven't told you, sought me out a couple years ago, and he heard I was playing on a golf tournament that he was in. He came over and he asked to talk to me. He goes, "Do you remember me?" And he goes, "No." He goes, "I'm that police officer you destroyed on the stand during the student's case." And he goes, "I actually retired from policing after your cross-examination." I said, "Because you were fucking lying." Yeah. He goes, "We were in a bad spot. We were being told what to say." Absolutely. And very, very seldom you have somebody come and say, "Hey, look, they were being told what to say to protect the unit." He goes, "But I never forgot how you held me accountable on that stand and what we ended up doing, because they testified that before the video started that everybody sees with them all jumping on you, that just before that you were being violent, right? Even though they had not one witness statement that said that, but we didn't have the video. Your memory was hard to put together. And I had asked the university, send me any closed circuit TV you have of that. And they said they didn't have any, right? So from surrounding, they said they didn't have any. Right. But thankfully the media was covering it. And that's why you need the media to cover this. And the media reported that the police officers said there was no closed circuit TV. And I don't know if you remember this day, but before court starts, somebody walks in, hands an envelope to the lawyers for the police and an envelope to me, and it's a disc in there.
Yeah.
And then the lawyers and I go and watch it. And it's closed circuit TV of you before the beating starts.
Yeah.
And you're just standing there looking around.
Yeah.
And they had just testified it didn't exist. And then all of a sudden, somebody who cared enough to have saved it and held it, you know, it gives me shivers to remember that somebody came forward, because but for that, like, how do you get justice in a world where people will lie to protect the institution? And just, you know, it was hard for us to talk too much about it because we got a very good settlement for you that we could talk about. But I just think, you know, when people have a mental health episode too, you're susceptible to thinking that you're crazy.
Yeah.
Right. And for you, tell us what it was like to kind of be vindicated after 4 or 5 years of being told you were in the wrong.
It was horrible, right? Because I was a well-connected community member in London. You know, I went to school full time. I worked part time. I coached soccer. I had a girlfriend at that time, and I made time for friends and family. And no matter what I did after that, you know, there was always that feeling that people just, you know, they either believed the media and you know, just kind of went out of my life. And the good part about it is it kind of also made me realize who was there and who has been there all along. So it helped me set priorities. It's not to say that it was not easy, but you know, leading up to the trial, like I was talking to you about it, I said I never raised a finger, right? And so the fact that I knew that they were lying is what actually gave me fuel to keep fighting. So I was actually telling my story to secondary school, university settings, and really what that was about is just to, you know, lessen that stigma about mental health, right? Because I was a very successful, you know, student. Throughout high school, I was athlete of the year every single year. I was the captain of the basketball team, soccer team. My life was very, very normal. And then it became very abnormal in the fourth year. And so the fact that something like that can happen to me, it can happen to anybody.
And you're such an inspiration to people because, you know, you didn't take that setback and let it destroy your life. Like, you work through it.
Yeah.
And turned your life into something that's very impressive. And we'll get to that. But I wanted you to maybe share a little bit about, you know, the recovery that you went through after the beating and to try and kind of get your life back. You know, tell us about those services and how they helped you change your life.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first primary service that I was connected to was the Victoria Hospital PEP program. And that was a very good program because it's very much a wraparound program where you are connected to a psychiatrist and a psychologist and a recreational therapist and an educational counselor, and a work counselor as well. And really, you know, they cover all aspects of well-being, right? And it was very difficult at the very beginning. You know, I still had some of the medication side effects that made it just very difficult to do simple tasks, let alone, you know, do anything spectacular, right? So that was the primary program that really, really helped me out.
And then you eventually went back to school, and what happened with your school career after that?
Yeah, so I mean, as you know, even before that, when I tried to get back to school, they kept denying it, right? And back to Western, and they said I had to meet with one of their doctors who would check in on me a bi-weekly basis for whatever reason, despite being cleared by the entire medical team.
At Victoria Hospital. And
Yes.
this is something people have to know about because it pisses me. Universities are power machines,
Yes.
right? That want to protect. And so if they didn't want to let you back into school when you had been cleared by the hospital, because that would make it look like they might have overreacted.
Yeah.
And so they put up all of these hurdles to stop you from going back, even though you were cleared by respected doctors. That was such a petty bitch move. And I remember telling their lawyer, and he would just kind of smirk. He's like, well, we can do whatever we want. I'm like, well, you shouldn't do whatever you want. You should do what's good. Because this guy wants to go back to school, and he's been cleared.
Yeah.
But eventually you did get back, didn't you?
Yeah, and I also wanted to continue my part-time job, which was literally across the street
Oh, that's
from
right.
the
Yeah. You
campus
worked in the
police.
catering. Yeah, and all of your employers wanted you back. They said you were the best
Yeah.
employee they had there,
Yeah.
and they wouldn't let you go back and work there.
Yeah, yeah,
Just, you know what that is too, is it's ignorance in institutions about how one can be affected by mental health issues and recover from them, right? And today's university campuses may be a bit more inclusive, but back then they were just ready to destroy you. But you did get your job back. You did go back to school.
Yeah.
What happened?
Because of this PEP program, I had a social worker through the program, and she really inspired me to become a social worker. So that year, after the incident, I went back a year later. I finished my fourth year of university. I did my Bachelor of Social Work at King's, and then I went on to do my master's level of social work at Wilfrid Laurier University. I've worked for just about most agencies here in London who deal with mental health and addictions. I actually ran the LHSC Cornerstone Counseling Clinic, which was a pilot project. And the main reason that I did that is because it supported students that had easy access to mental health counseling. And there was a passion in me because had that been available for me at that time, maybe the incident wouldn't have happened altogether, right? Because I didn't know who to reach out to.
Yeah, you're just supposed to be a tough person who deals with it, and there was no outlet to go and talk to somebody. That's important.
Yeah, exactly. And then right after that, I worked in the private field, dealing with people following motor vehicle accidents. And then just about a year ago, I actually took on a position for the same program that actually helped me get well.
So that to me should send cheers down everybody's spine, because the program that helps you get well, that kind of helps nurture you back so you can go back to the same school where you were viciously assaulted, go back to work, finish your degree, get a master's, and end up becoming a social worker who helps people. You end up in full circle going and now working for that program that helped you. That's fucking amazing.
Yeah,
honestly.
thank you.
And how, are you enjoying that work there? What's it like?
Absolutely. I love my job, and especially around the family support component. The reason our program does really well is that we focus on more than just counseling and medications. We look at everything else equally important, such as quality of life. And as well as really including family support, right? Like we have to remember that we spend an hour with clients per week, and the rest of the 23 hours are usually spent with their family, loved ones, or friends. So they need to be involved in all levels of care.
Your journey is inspirational. I think there are so many people who would love, who this should be sent to or shared to, so they can hear that, once you get into a mental health situation, it's not a death sentence. You don't have to carry it for your whole life. Like if you get the treatment, you have the support, we can fix it, treat it, and then go on to be successful. What do you say to people who are kind of in that rut? They think they can never get out of it. Like, because what I see, you're almost an exception in some ways, your success story. But why do you think there's so many people who, once they kind of start down that path, they never get out of it?
I think it's the shame, right? And especially with men, right? We're much less likely to reach out for help because we're supposed to be superheroes, and not just men. There's a lot of, cultures that, they don't have such a thing as mental health issues, even though they pretty well exist, right? Just about it everywhere. Mental health doesn't really discriminate based on, gender or status or anything else. It happens across board, and it's really like this feeling of feeling inferior, that if you're struggling, you're weak, and so people are hesitant to reach out. But the moment that they break their ankle and go to the doctor, there's no hesitation. They get their ankle treated and they move on with recovery. And really, that's what I've been fighting for.
What it's a little bit like, maybe to jump in?
Yeah.
Let's say you break your ankle, but you never go to treatment. Yeah. And you just keep walking on it.
That's
You know what I
right.
mean? And it's trying to
Exactly.
heal itself, but like it's kind of healing itself and you get permanent damage. You can never get it back
Yeah.
because you didn't go and get that treatment and just kind of keep pounding it. And so if you have a mental health issue that needs to be addressed and you don't get the proper treatment and you
Yeah.
just kind of keep walking on that ailment,
That's right.
you create permanent damage that stops you from running. That's an interesting way of looking at it. And so
Yeah.
letting people know that it's okay to talk and see if they need treatment early is a great service we can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's about, you know, looking within and reflecting on all of these different life experiences that you've had, right? Some of them have had more impact than others. If there are ones that are still lingering and creating that weight on your shoulder,
Mm.
if they're not addressed, eventually all of that bottles up and the body just says no, right? And it's got to come out one way or another.
But there's a kind of what I'm seeing in there though is because your family was focused on moving forward, they didn't really allow you to kind of wallow there either, or your own
No.
sense of, hey, I have to take care of my family. I have to move forward. So you just didn't kind of, because what I see all on the other side of the coin
Yeah.
is that there are some people who are just too quick to say, I'm incapable of doing anything.
Yeah.
And so they avoid any difficulty. And it is the path to recovery. It's a difficult path. Like, correct me if I'm wrong.
It's a very difficult path, right? But it's necessary for personal and professional growth. I think we can only grow through diversity and challenges.
Did you read Sarah Pauli's book, Lean into Danger?
I haven't.
Yeah, you should check it out if you get a chance. Not that I agree with everything in the book, but she had a bad concussion.
Mhm.
And she spent 10 years going to every doctor in the world that said, stay out of the light. Don't do this. Don't do that. Don't do that. And so for 10 years, she never did anything.
Right.
Couldn't do anything. And then finally she met this doctor in Florida who said, stop, right? Does the light bother you? Yes. Let's see how long you can stay in the light. 4 minutes.
Yes.
Next week, 5 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Like you have to acknowledge that you have to heal and you have to recover responsibly, but recovering means stretching yourself.
That's right.
Right. And I think if you read that, and it actually cured her concussion, like she's able to work full days again, but it wasn't until she leaned a little bit into the recovery,
Yes.
you know, as opposed to just hiding in your bedroom and saying, I can't do anything for the rest of my life and give me a check.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's a hard balance probably for you as a social worker to tell somebody, hey, you got to get out there and go for a walk.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you do that?
Well, I think we all have limitations, but there's so many more things we can still do, right? And and sometimes when you're going through that anxiety and depression period, or you know whatever struggles you may be going through mentally at that time, you see that tunnel vision and you see no escape, right? And sometimes it just takes that one person, you know, to say that, yeah, but what about all these other things, right? I do think we often just focus on what we don't have when we really should be focusing on what we do have and really like taking that all the way what we do have, right?
That's interesting. Well, I think that's one of the things that you bring to the table when you inspire your clients. And we talked about a book, but you know, I think what you need if you want more of my advice, even though I'm not your lawyer anymore, you got to get this book done because you
Yes.
have a story to tell that will be inspirational, that hopefully students can read
Yes.
and see that it's okay, and you can outline some paths to empower them. So I really hope that you're leaning into that book so people can hear your story, and maybe you could talk a little bit more about it to more, because you have a beautiful voice and a calm presence. Like I think you talking to people, what you do one-on-one is probably very effective.
Yeah.
I think you should have an audience so they can hear your story on a grander scale. Do you have any plans like that?
Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned to you, a big component of my recovery period was actually retelling my story to these secondary school settings, the university settings, because every time I told my story, I discovered something new. And not only that, you know, in the audience, you'll have 5 or 6 people put up their hand and say, I have an uncle, I have a brother, I have a sister, right? And so when you know, level that playing field of, you know, we all struggle with it, you know, we can reshape that story, right? It doesn't have to be a story about, you know, just trauma and, you know, losses and, you know, pity, right? It can be a story of post-traumatic growth, because I would say, you know, going through this recovery and trial and you know, really not giving up, because I wanted the truth to be out, and eventually the truth came out. That's actually what gave me fuel to keep going, to be a stronger person.
I had when I was in the military and we were in a bad place. We had lost some people and seen some horrible things. And I'm not a religious person, but there was a padre there who was just a good human being at help. I think good padres see people suffering and know how to provide some comfort with words. And it wasn't a denomination that was mine, but I remember him he came over to me because I had put myself aside. He's like, Lieutenant, he goes, this sorrow you feel carves out space in your soul for character to reside. And, reframing difficulty into something that helps us grow is probably one of the greatest gifts we can give to people who feel like their sorrow or suffering is only a bad thing. It's actually just what happens in life, and it's how you respond to it.
Absolutely.
That changes things. I was thinking, you're so calm in your voice and you're helping people, but I don't know if you have a podcast, but in terms of helping students, I would donate this studio here to you if you wanted to do a podcast where you could talk to students about their challenges, or maybe bring them in, but do something like that so you could get your voice heard. And then with these podcasts, you can interview students from all over the world talking about what their struggles and stuff. And so if you want to do a podcast and get it going, like, you can use the studio, donate it to you so that you can communicate, share your message. And sometimes those podcasts can be chapters in a book too. And what I'm going to do is, I know one of the officers, another officer who is involved in this. And I think it would be really interesting, almost kind of along that truth and reconciliation thing. How sometimes you meet the people who I think it'd be amazing for you to talk to him on a podcast.
Would love to.
Because that person reached out and said that he deals with the guilt of what happened, right? And if the two of you could sit down and talk about it, I think that would just be something that could change the world. So
absolutely.
Let's look. All right, would you be interested in doing something like that?
I absolutely would. Yeah.
Podcast. It's a little homework. Still, you're growing on your path. I know you got 2 kids, so you don't have a lot of time, but we got to get a book going.
Yep.
I think getting a podcast, you got a voice. You got a voice, face for radio, voice for podcast. Just joking.
Yeah.
He's a handsome man if anybody's listening and not watching. But I think that's the way to get your message out there, because your journey has been spectacular. And you're an inspiration to show that people, look, you can have an injury in your brain, get better, and then go ahead and change the world. You have any final messages you'd like to pass on to those people who have somebody who might be suffering, or themselves or their family members?
I would say have no shame, have no fear. It's a normal human experience. We're in a very difficult world. It's not easy coping with all the roles and responsibilities we have to take on. So unfortunately, you can't handle the world yourself, and you always need other people. You need good relationships and people that are potentially in the field that can really look at some of those things that are not helping you sleep at night, that are constantly keeping you worried, because it doesn't have to be that way forever.
Well, Ernest, although I was your attorney and your warrior for this, you've always been a hero of mine by how well you dealt with that scenario, that struggle, how good you were to your family. I'm so proud of what you've done, and thank you for sharing your story, and use this anytime.
Thank you very much for having me.
And I'll just do a last message. Like, I do these podcasts, and sometimes I piss off people on the left, people on the right, but talking about mental health is something that's meaningful to me, because I've helped a lot of veterans who have struggled with it, and it's cost them their lives, their families, their careers. And when I deal with people who are suffering depression or who are suicidal, one of the stories that I tell them, and maybe it can help a few of the listeners, but when I got a DNA test a few years ago, they were able to determine that I had a maternal ancestor that went back almost 300,000 years. So they could actually see the maternal DNA links from my test. And it got me to thinking, I just divided what an average lifespan was into 300,000, and it came up that I have 11,200 or so parents. that go back, at least from what this test could do. And I deal with people who are suicidal or who want to quit. And what can you tell somebody in that situation? And what I tell them is, like, if you think about it, you have 11,000 moms and dads who had to fight off drought, famine, Mongol hordes, raiding tribes. And imagine in every family, they had 4 kids, 2 died, 2 survived. Your ancestor survived, met somebody who then had 5 kids. Your ancestor survived. That happened 11,000 times. And each pair of those 11,000 ancestors got up and fought one last time, got up and found some food when they were starving, the odds of you being here today are so infinitesimally small. And you're here only because of the sacrifice of your ancestors who fought and took that extra step to get here. So you're living today, right? You owe your ancestors a duty to fight through it, right? It doesn't mean what you're feeling is not real, but you owe your ancestors a duty to fight through it so that you don't get killed by drugs and end the lineage that your ancestors fought to keep going. So keep your head up, seek assistance, and fight the good fight. Thanks for listening.